There's been so many different debates about lats, where they lose leverage, whether the subdivisions of it are relevant. And it's led to people approaching their lat training in a number of different ways. The lat pull down, like the OG traditional lat pull down, maybe it's not the best way to target the lats. Could be a lot of teres emphasis. A lot of people, do they even know the difference between their teres and their lats? They were probably trying to grow that anyway. But as far as the lats specifically, is there one arm path you can recommend that'll give you a good mix of everything? Or is it just the fact that, no, the humerus can move on so many different paths, and the lats, it's like you're referring to such a big group of muscles. There is just no one path that is going to really do it all justice. And so don't think about your training that way. Just think about creating different rowing actions with the humerus. How should I think about it? As someone, especially where I can't go hit 3 lat movements, but I can hit where I'm at now. I've got horizontal rowing and horizontal pulling and vertical pulling.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm sure you're familiar with the midwit meme that's where I've ended up, which is at the beginning, it's precisely what you said. It's like something horizontal, something vertical, with the caveat that like I would just make it tight to your body, and then I'll caveat it one more time later. Somewhere in the middle of the midwittery, it was like 120 degrees and like slight adduction and pull to the hip and rotate the trunk contralateral, and just the list kept going. And now I'm back to narrow vertical pull down, narrow kind of row. If I had to be nitpickier, it wouldn't be like horizontal. It would be slightly above horizontal, just because the amount of protraction you have increases with a little bit more flexion. But I think the most important thing, honestly, with lats that I've really paid attention to in the last year and a half-ish has just been their function from the perspective of the shoulder girdle rather than just the humerus. What people, I think, could recognize or conjure up an image of in their head is like the difference between moving your arm would be like, just imagine like a row where you're just focusing on like your upper arm bone versus something that's more if you were hanging from a bar and you're doing scap pull-ups, right? So those are like two distinct categories of motion that often overlap. And the lats, in terms of if there were such a thing as a primary function, which like on a technical level just drives me off a wall to say primary function. But in this case, if we're just going to roll with it, it would be to move and slide the shoulder girdle. And something that's really staggering to me is I posted this little variation where I was basically just doing like a cable single arm like depression, and people just totally lost their minds at that. I never expect when things are going to go south and when they're not. But nevertheless, I think the takeaway there is basically just load your arms vertically and focusing in that instance on shrugging and reverse shrugging. So up to down shoulder girdle stuff, and then a row that is like forward to backward shoulder girdle stuff. And then I think that's pretty much like good to go. I think that the other considerations like, is slightly wider better or is across the body better? Those to me ultimately come down to the practical limitations of a situation rather than the technical limitations. So what I mean by that is, on one extreme, if I'm training with a pro bodybuilder whose meat is literally just getting in the way of them being able to pull their arm across the body, I don't give a shit. Okay, we're going to go forward and backward. Or on the other end of the spectrum, if my mom, who's trying to perform this pull down, has pain in this narrow path and not in this wide path, guess what? We're going to go with the wide path, and we're just going to focus more on like armpit motion rather than arm motion. And I think that's a really good like heuristic for people to think about when they're thinking about like rowing in general.
Definitely changes how I would approach it.
Yeah.
Training, then you'll love our programming too. Head to the notes below to grab a free week of general physical preparation. You get unlimited access to me and fresh programming every single week for less than $1 a day.